Hey, everybody, welcome to a special episode of Let's Talk Fortitude. Today, I got my son, Chad Garrett. I've invited him to come on to talk about his book. And Chad, thanks for coming on, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man. We've been in this fight long enough together to where it's a long time coming type of thing. Like it's good to finally jump on and have a chat and hopefully give some people some insight and context to some of the things that have happened over the last 4 or 5 years and stuff like that.
So if you see a couple of things popping up here, I got a new program that I'm using. We're actually coming to you via StreamYard now. We've always traveled around, and we really like to be present with others, with our guests whenever we go to record. But this is the first recording that we've done on our new remote program that we're doing through StreamYard. So anything we have oopsies or whatever, y'all just have to bear with us. We're not going to edit anything out. We're just going to let it roll.
Leave it to the producer to be the guinea pig.
So we have been doing some rebranding with Let's Talk Fortitude. You can see the logos changed. The intros changed just a little bit. I hope we didn't blow your ears out. Chad was telling me, man, that's loud. So,
and that's my fault because that's how I mixed it down in post-production. So that's on me. Don't blame the show host for that one.
No, it's all right, man. It's Chad's getting ready to do. Just to give you a little bit of background on Chad. Chad is very active in the film industry now. Whether it's he just got his first lead acting role that he's going to be going to Houston to do. But I mean, he's done anything from. I'll let him tell you about all of his different positions, but the one that his mom and I actually got to go and be part of, or to see, actually I was part of it. I have a cameo in it. I had to sign my first Sony release. Nigel, his wife, took pictures of us for Eleanor's Bench that we were like judges, and they put it up on the wall. So whether I get anything in the show or not, we'll have to see.
So there's context behind that. I was brought in originally for this project as a carpenter, right? And understand like the timeline here is I was active duty Air Force all the way up until April 4th. And I started on my first film set on April 5th. Okay, like the very next. So I like packed my bags the previous weekend, moved over the course of that weekend, drove back across the state of Virginia to sign my last bit of paperwork and be escorted off base and hand in my CAC, which stands for Common Access Card, military ID. I had to hand in military ID. And then I drove back across the state of Virginia so I could start work the next day, and I was supposed to be a carpenter. That's all I was supposed to do. I was supposed to be a carpenter. I was supposed to help build some sets, working for somebody that knew what they were doing, because I had experience with power tools and stuff like that, but I had never built a set before. I had no idea what I was doing. And the carpenter, or the construction foreman, or the construction coordinator that they wanted to have on board didn't show up. And so we got 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, and I had been leading the team of people that were building stuff. It was mostly students, and they actually pulled in the costumer, our costume designer or costume assistant. She got there early, and so they pulled her into construction with me, and we were working on it. And then they kind of found themselves in a bind, and they came to me one day and they asked me, it's like, hey, the guy that we thought that we wanted to be here isn't going to be here. Do we need to call someone? Or you've been working here, you've been messing with this. Do you want it? We're willing to give it to you if you want it, if you think that you can do it. And do it, right, means build 2 sound stages basically from scratch in an open warehouse, and then retrofit 17 other rooms, either on set or off site somehow. So I built 19 sets basically. I either built or retrofitted 19 sets over the course of 3 months with a team of mostly students that I was having to teach a lot about how to use power tools and stuff for the first time. I had 2 people on my entire team of like 9 that had ever used power tools before, which was a really interesting project. But that's finally coming out. The courtroom that we had to build from the ground up. I built an entire just a courtroom. I turned a warehouse building into a courtroom. And on the walls of that courtroom are pictures, and to bring the story full circle, Dad is one of the pictures that's on there. My wife, who is not only is she about to take the bar exam, but she also does marketing and branding and all this other stuff. She makes you know, talk about a dynamic duo. She definitely completes me and pushes me. She took pictures of both John here and the some of the other faculty members and parents of people that were associated to the film. And then she went in and by hand made them look like watercolor or not watercolor, oil paintings. And then we took those and we sent them, we printed them out in these big sheets and we put them in frames and we hung them on the wall as part of the set dressing. So that's how John G gets a cameo in a Sony production.
So some of the other ones you've worked on, one was what was that gator movie?
Attack of the Meth Gator.
Yeah, Attack of the Meth Gator. I mean, it's funny to hear your mom says, "I never thought I'd ever hear my words that to tell my son, you built a great meth lab."
Yeah, that not only that, but of all the movies that I have ever made and that I will probably ever make, the one that will probably only ever garner any attention at all from my older brother is going to be that one, because that's the only one that's in his realm of I don't know, it's just very much him. It's the low budget, just stupid spoof kind of movie, and it was made so the company that financed it. And this is how I should have known what I was getting myself into with this. The company that financed it is the same company that made the Sharknado series that was super big on the Sci-Fi Channel for years. Not because it's good, but because it's bad, right? They made the first Sharknado movie as a spoof on Twister. So I grew up watching the movie Twister, and Sharknado came out as this really funky way of combining the Twister movie, right? This natural disaster movie with Jaws, which is another one of the movies I grew up watching because of you, John G. It's one of your favorite movies of all time. And they kind of smashed the two together and made this really bad, low budget movie. That I think that a guy who played Michael in Ashton Kutcher. I think that Ashton Kutcher was in one of them or something like that. I could be wrong. Same company that made those is the company that financed this film. We shot 127 pages in 7 days, and I was the entire art department. So I was managing props, which we were using fake airsoft guns that looked like real guns. So that means that I was also acting as a pseudo armorer. Now, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. They were not real weapons. I was not the actual armorer because there were no real weapons, but we treated the airsoft weapons as though they were real because they looked real. And so I was giving safety briefings on that all the time. And before every scene, I would have to take the props away after a scene. I would give them to the actors on the scene. And then the first AD would take over as far as the safety management side of that thing on set. And then after I would deliver the props, I would go and I would build a different set across the property, because we were on this great piece of property, the Kahana Stunt School out in Groveland, Florida. If you guys ever want to learn about a living legend, Kim Kahana was a stuntman in Hollywood for 62, 63 years. He's like in his 90s now. He's a Bronze Star recipient in the military, having served in Korea. He lost a son in Vietnam. There's an entire documentary about his life that's coming out that I'm actually really excited to see. But we got the opportunity not only to meet him, who's like this living legend in Hollywood, but also to film on his property. So I would go across the way and I turned like a little covered tent, like mesh tent carport area. I turned that into a meth lab. Their major stunt, the stunt barn that they did that had all of their pads. I had to pull the pads up off the ground, and I had to make like this super meth lab that was supposed to be underground and everything. That was all very interesting. I had to deck out the entirety of downtown Groveland Park, the park of downtown Groveland. I had to deck that out to make it look like a 4th of July parade was happening. And God bless her. I had to take Kim Kahana's personal upstairs in-home bar and make it look like a movie set. The issue was is that Kim has a bunch of pictures that from people that he's met, everybody from Dolly Parton to Chuck Norris to Bruce Lee. Like, he has pictures of him with these people, or signed pictures of them that are like screwed into his wall. We can't see any of those because even though the person's visage is kind of public domain, whoever took the picture could potentially sue the film because we didn't get the right to use it. So here I am hanging a bunch of like camo netting to try and cover it up. And the only thing that we left showing on that was this neon sign that says Kahana on it as a callback to Kim, who was there with us. But I turned his upstairs bar into what was in the film supposed to be a guy named Grady, who is a veteran of Desert Shield, a Marine Corps veteran of Desert Shield, like his bar that he runs now. So I had to deck that out amongst a couple of other things. But I had a week of pre-pro, which had 3 meetings in those days. I had 3 meetings over the course of that week. So I only really had like 4 days of actual pre-production time. So it was one of those shows where I was barely staying ahead, 1 step ahead of production the entire time. To the point where, to the disdain of many of my friends in the film industry, I actually developed trench foot in my left foot on this production. A very minor form of it, but nevertheless, like it was a bit freaky. But I developed that because I was on my feet in a pair of boots in the swamps of Florida for 14 to 16 hours a day for basically a week straight. So that was intense, but God bless everybody that worked on that show. And for the bar scene, I almost forgot about this. God bless her heart. One of the extras is a woman by the name of Shane Allen. And Shane and I have become good friends since the filming of the show, but that bar would not have come together without her, because Kim Kahana is a fan of gin. And so almost all the liquor that was in the house that I could have used to make this place actually look like a bar was all the same brand of gin. So God bless her heart. Shane Allen was able to bring me, because her and her husband are both doctors and they spend a lot of time traveling. Not heavy drinkers, but whenever they go abroad, they like to buy alcohol that's made in these foreign places. And every now and then they'll pass by a package store and grab something unique. But they don't ever really drink it. So they actually had mostly full bottles of just a variety of alcohol that I was able to use to actually make this bar look like a bar, which was just really, really cool. And ultimately, like I said, you want to talk about God moments. I met some people on that show that were Christians, but work in LA and work in Hollywood, who didn't feel comfortable expressing their faith. Like they were, the way I like to describe it is it's like there were people on that set that were just looking for permission to exercise their faith. And on that show, praise be to God, because without him and without his prompting, I wouldn't have had the courage to say or do or be kind of who I was on that set. But I was able to openly talk about my faith, which gave people this open door and this free path to speak about things that they thought in the film industry are kind of taboo. And that kind of trickled down to where even when I wasn't around, because I was running like a chicken with my head cut off, there were prayer circles that were actually being done on this film set over people who were having issues. Some people were having surgery. Some people were having issues kind of on set. And to watch how the Ruach, the Spirit of the Holy One, just inspired people to come together and to recognize the Almighty was a really special thing on a secular set. I've been on tons of Christian sets. Eleanor's Bench was a Christian set. My favorite film set I've been on so far is a film called Birthright Outlaw that's supposed to be coming out at the end of July. That was one of the most, you want to talk about a spiritual fortress. Not that we didn't face any persecution or attacks, but there was so much good happening for the kingdom of God on that film set that it really, to this day, just remembering it blows me away. But even then, like, I've been on all those sets, but to watch on a secular set the providence and the kingdom of God and watch God work in that way was just on a different level. So that's a whole tangent, but a really cool opportunity.
So when did you actually write "You're Not Special, You're Gifted"? When did you actually pen that, and how long did it take you to write that?
So being a story guy, I want to, if we're going to talk about "You're Not Special, You're Gifted," I have to kind of go way back before then. And that is to actually the first time for Christmas one year, you bought me a copy of 21 Indispensable Laws of Leadership. 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader by John C. Maxwell when I was like 13 or 14 years old, because I was getting picked as a leader, as a team leader, and as a team captain on the football teams that I was playing on. And you recognized a need for there to be some maturity there. And I cannot thank you enough for that, as well as many of the other things that you taught me and that my other football coaches taught me, set me on a trajectory that I could not have otherwise. I wouldn't be sitting where I'm at doing what I'm doing if it weren't for that. But that's where that started, was this leadership journey that I went down. And that has popped up time and again throughout my life, these leadership lessons and this emphasis on good quality leadership, first and foremost. And so as I was going through the military, I got picked as a team lead, and I was going through TACP training for a time. So I had a major on my team as well as a second lieutenant. And we did an exercise one day where the cadre said, okay, your major just got shot, as did your second lieutenant, or your first lieutenant. Your second lieutenants are still a team lead, but you've been field promoted, Garrett. You're now full on team lead. You are in the position of an officer all day. Good luck. And not only was that a fantastic experience under pressure to exercise things that I felt like I had been preparing my entire life for, but I had a major and a first lieutenant and 7 second lieutenants and 3 NCOs, 2 staff sergeants and a tech sergeant that were available afterwards, where I was able to tell them, like, hey, I would really like to do a hot wash and see how I did. And the feedback that they gave me from that day was incredible. It was on level. It was something I never, in my wildest dreams, I never could have possibly. It's actually difficult for me to even like rehash exactly what it was that they taught me in that moment and that memory. I have it all written down in a notebook somewhere, but it was so dense and so constructive that whenever I got reclassed in the military, I was trying to find a way to still apply the leadership stuff that I had learned, specifically in from these great leaders, these great officers that I was on team with, but also things that I had been practicing since way back whenever you gave me that book. So I become in this search for trying to figure out who it is that I want to be and what it is that I want to do, because up until this point, my identity had been very much wrapped up in who I was as a member of these teams. Was to start doing leadership development and motivational speaking, right? I loved guys like Dr. Miles Monroe. I loved guys like John Maxwell. I loved guys like Simon Sinek. And I was like, how cool would it be to have that be my career path? Like, how cool, like if I could show up and help people and just give them knowledge that I have, so that they can make the world a better place. How cool would that be? And so I got involved in the Airman Leader Corps at this new training, student leader corps, Airman Leader Corps, at my new base after I got reclassed. And I eventually ascended all the way to the student commander position. So I was the number one highest ranked student among 537 students that were in my unit, and led the unit to being the squadron of the month, to being, I think, squadron of the quarter, as well as the same day that we got squadron of the month, I got awarded the Airman Leader of the Month award for the entire wing at that point. Or the Airman of the Month award, not the Airman Leader of the Month award, the Airman of the Month award for the entire wing. So that's roughly 2,500 airmen that I basically competed against to get that award. And I was seeing that as a sign of like, okay, well, maybe this is something that I need to do. So I eventually graduate from school, because there's only so much that you can do in a school setting. And I get to my first base, I get involved in Toastmasters, and I'm trying to figure out how to make this small little podcast thing that I was trying to do that I wasn't being very successful at, in conjunction with these live speeches that I was giving, and figure out how do I make this happen. And I had a friend and mentor who's still a friend today, a very close friend today, named Ryan Flum, who I was on the phone with. And I was trying to figure out, like, man, I just don't know what my next step is. I don't know where to go. And he said, well, you want to do motivational speaking, you need to do two things. You need to write a book, and you need to start a podcast, because nobody's going to have you to their event to speak if they don't know what it is you're going to speak about. So all the things that you want to speak about, all the things that you want to say, you need to do it in a podcast, and you need to write a book about it. So not 3 months after that conversation, I had that conversation headed back from Lynchburg, Virginia to Hampton Roads, from seeing a girl I was dating at the time. I had that conversation in the car drive back. 3 months later, the world shuts down. So in that 3 months, I started a podcast, and I was formulating ideas of what I wanted to do, but the world shut down. And so there was nothing for me to do but to wake up and to write a book. And so I wrote You're Not Special, You're Gifted in 7 weeks. It's not, well, I look at it now, I'm like, man, it doesn't seem like it's quite long enough to reflect 7 weeks. And then I remember all the things that I cut from it. Because it's not meant to be a book that takes a long time to get through. As admittedly, also at the same point in time, I have a good amount of life experience, but I don't have a ton of life experience. And so there's not a whole big reason. It's like, let's get these points out in as clear and concise of a fashion as I possibly can, so that people can sit down and read it in a sitting, and they can come back to it and come back to it and come back to it in a similar way that I do. One of my favorite books is Tuesdays with Morrie. And I read that book cover to cover just about every year, because I think that it has some very quality truths that are in it. And so I wanted to aim for something like that when I wrote You're Not Special, You're Gifted. And we were also dealing, the big inspiration for it, the sort of thing that creates the connecting through line through the entire book from all of the different principles, because it does have a bunch of different things that I've learned over the course of my life in both leadership and in motivation. The through line that connects all of them is this idea of having grown up in a participation trophy culture. Everybody gets a ribbon. Everybody gets a trophy. If you participated, you get a trophy because you're special. No, you're not. And unless you do something of merit, unless you do something that is worthy of you actually receiving an award, you should understand that the award isn't what the goal should be. The goal should be to identify your God-given gift. And if you never get an award, that's okay. And that instead, that your job on this planet isn't to try and achieve some trophy. Your job on this planet is to give the gift that you have been given back into the world. Because otherwise, the only place that you're going to take that gift is to the grave. and you're just going to add to the wealth of the cemetery. And that's an entire principle that I talk about in the book, that's based on teachings of Dr. Miles Monroe before he died.
Well, I know that several of the guys that anytime we do a podcast, which I don't have to give you one because you've already got one. All the podcasts that we've done, we've always given a copy of your book to the guest. I even mailed actually to, I'm going to give Kurt Lively a shout out here, out in West Monroe, Louisiana. I actually mailed him a hat and a book, and he read it. He sent it back, said it was great. Also, I sent Randy Bougele a copy of it. He loved it, and supposedly he said he was buying a copy for his boys for Christmas that year. Said it was a great read. So I've read it. I thought it was a great read. It is based on Christian values and viewpoints, but it's not preachy at all.
I specifically avoided doing that, right? Like my worldview is Christian, and I was both partially raised in that Christian household through you and mom, but as we've talked a little bit on the podcast before, you went through 19 years in the desert, and that 19 years in the desert started when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And so there was 19 years roughly that I had to, you and mom never discouraged me from going to church or anything like that. But we were not, as a family, actively going to church. And so there's an element of that where I had to sort of discover my faith on my own. And part of that discovery of faith comes in the form of this core principle, the core principle that says, if it's true, if God is God and God speaks truth, then regardless of whether someone believes in God, they should be able to find truth in it. So I approached it from this perspective that though, yes, through God and through Christianity, I came to these principles. However, even if you don't believe in God, because these principles are true, you should find value in them as well, because truth doesn't rely on a certain theological outcome. It doesn't matter what denomination you are. The truth is the truth, and that is the truth, and you can either choose to accept it or reject it. And if you reject it, there's consequences. And so the stark reality of things and trying to approach hard to grasp concepts from a new angle and paint pictures in a way through stories and parables, I tried to provide practical application for these ideas that when you hear them in a motivational speech, or whenever you hear them in a leadership development speech, sometimes they can feel very ethereal and untangible. They'll make you feel good for a little while, but then you leave and you have no idea how to apply them. Everything in the book I wanted to make sure is applicable somehow, whether it's a mindset change or an exercise that you can go through to keep the enemy from getting in your head, or whether it's knowledge and statistics, or breakdowns of psychology as to where depression and things like that and fear and trauma come from, and where those are developed in the early part of our adolescence. All of that type of stuff is very concisely written in a book. I did a lot of research actually into the psychological aspect of where trauma and pain comes through in children for one of the last chapters of this book. And shout out to my buddy Jason Donahue. I wrote the original chapter for that, called Crush the Coward. And he hated it. He absolutely despised that chapter because I had this principle and I was very in your face about it. And it was so lacking in grace and so lacking in empathy the way that I first wrote it. And he gave me one of the hardest critiques on that I have ever gotten. He critiqued the book a whole lot, and he's come around to tell me, like, man, how it's so much better than it was before. But without his critique, I would not have been inspired. This is a great example. You want to talk about discipleship and community and iron sharpening iron. Without Jason being as hard on me in that particular chapter as he was, I would not have been inspired to do the days of research that I did in psychology and reading psychological studies that led me to expanding that chapter by quite a bit. I forget exactly by how much I expanded it, but I added 4 or 5 subsections to that chapter based on the research that I did, so that it wasn't just something that I was spouting off. It was something that was applicable. And the way that Jason challenged me was, he said, I want to challenge you to change your mind. I want to challenge you in this thing. It's not that I think that you're wrong, but I don't think that you actually have a grasp of what it is that you're trying to say. You've got a feeling, and it's coming across very wrong, very abrasive, and you're going to alienate people. And so I took the scientific method here, where I tried to treat what I had written as my hypothesis, and I tried to disprove my hypothesis. And what I actually found was that all of the research that I was looking up psychologically, and where so much of the trauma and stuff comes from, was actually rooted in the idea that I originally had. So my idea was correct, but I didn't have the knowledge to back it up. And what I ended up doing was going on this journey of discovering the knowledge that backs these things up, and that provides this empathetic context of not just, this is how you should look at this, but like, this is how you should look at this. And I know, not only because I've done the research, but because I've been there too. I've seen these things. I've experienced these things. I've had to face these fears. So that is, when you're writing a book, whenever you're coming up with an idea, you need to put it in the hands of people that are going to call you out, and that are going to make you think and question yourself, because it's only through the fire do you become better. It's only through the forge that you can actually create something that's worth coming back to time and time again. And I think that because of the incredible individuals like Jason that were involved in the editing and the curating of the knowledge in this book, I think that they are very much the things that make it great. The ideas and where they come from are mine, but they were honed into something much better than I could have ever made them by the people that were involved. So
I think one thing we need to understand as Christians is that we're all given gifts. I mean, even at birth, God planned it. We're all born into a sinful life. I mean, that's just because of Adam and Eve. We can't get away from that. That's just the way it is.
mm-hmm.
So we all have gifts that God has given us in one way or another. And I think one of the quotes that's in your book that one of the quotes that's in your book that I really like the most is that live your life in a way that you don't need a tombstone.
Yeah,
you think about William Tyndale. You think about Billy Graham. Martin Luther King Jr. There's so many that can go on. George Washington, John Adams. We can go on and on and on.
I mean, look
Ronald Reagan. The current times, to where people who have lived their lives to where people know who they are. I mean, their legacy. They leave a legacy behind them. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. That they live their life in a way. And I'm going to have this I'm just going to tell everybody we're getting ready to have Brian Sexton on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to one of his podcasts, and he was talking about influence and impact. And he said that he thought that the greater of the two was impact. And I'm like, so I come home and made your mom's brain hurt that day, and James White, by the way. So when you think about these people, not only did they have an influence upon how we live our lives today and our Constitution, the Supreme Court.
And the people that come to mind for me when I think of that idea of live your life so that you don't need a tombstone, right? And I'll quote Dr. Miles Monroe here exactly. He said in the book, I quote him directly, and the speech that he gave, he was actually in Brazil when he gave it. He was talking about the wealth of the cemetery, and he said, "Why do you need a tombstone? He said, it's because you were so useless while you were here that we had to mark the spot to remind us that you used to be here, that you didn't leave a big enough impact, as you were talking about, for people to remember you past the time that you were here. And that comes down to legacy. Children and the raising and rearing of children can be a form of this, a version of this sort of legacy that you leave. It's actually arguably the most important legacy that you leave, right? Like who it is that carries on your lineage and your name and the values that they put into the world. What does that look like? What type of gifts did you help grow? Did God bestow in them that you helped nurture? Or did you stifle it? Did you try and snuff it out for some reason? And then moving into the thing that Brian says, I had to think about that too, because they're the greatest commodity that any man, right? Any masculine, and I'll take this into a slightly different direction. Men today need this book. Men today need to understand that they have a gift and that they need to use it, because there is an attack specifically on the masculinity of doing something, of active members of our society that are men. And this is something that's very interesting, because the greatest commodity that an impactful man can have is influence. Who are the people that he can have around him that he can influence them towards the dream that he has? Or how is it that when he is following someone that has a dream, can he influence them to stay on a correct path? When we look so often at tyrants in history, it is typically because they began to ignore the influence of those that were around them, versus when we look at the great kings of the past, they listened closely to their counsel. It's the difference between the types of men such as Commodus versus Charlemagne, right? Very different people that one listened to counsel and had a very clear vision and path, and was willing to correct that path, versus the other was just worried about their own selfish desire. And they didn't care what anybody else thought, because they were the emperor and they were going to do what they wanted to do. And this is cyclical. This is repetitive throughout everything. So influence is the greatest commodity that any man can possibly have. However, it is a means to an end. The reason why impact, and this is where I agree with Brian, the reason why impact is more important than influence is that influence is the means to an end. Without influence, you don't get impact. But unless you are aiming for an impact, to make an impact in someone's life by using the gifts that you have, by setting a vision, or to come alongside a vision that is being painted for you, and helping to make sure that that vision stays on the straight and narrow to the true, the good, and the beautiful, it's pointless. If the vision, if the impact is not the end goal, then why try and achieve influence at all? Doesn't make any sense. So both of them go hand in hand. And I think that one, like I just said, is a means to the other. I think that influence is a means towards impact. Now, another way to look at this, and this is something that just popped into my brain, so you'll have to indulge me, is the idea that influence is a measure of how broad your touch is, whereas impact is how deep. So the other way that you could view this, right, in the same way that you can view the Bible from 70 different faces, that's an old rabbinic term, the idea that Torah has 70 faces and 70 different ways to interpret a story. So too does this principle of impact and influence, right? In the same way that influence is necessary to achieve an impact, influence can also be the quantifiable measure of how broad your touch is versus how deep that touch can go. And it is arguable to say that you could make the argument that it is more important to be around 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 12 men and have an impact in their life that goes miles deep, to where they can then have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 12 men around them that have miles deep of impact, versus having a platform like Jordan Peterson and he's touching hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people all the time. That's a very broad impact. right? That's influence. The idea that you can influence the ideas and the minds of all of these different people, but what's the impact? What's the depth? How deep are you going in those individuals' lives? And if you have that large platform, not to say that it is that you can't have a deep impact in people's life, but you're not going to have a deep impact in all of those people's lives. And the people that are in your inner circle, when you have that broad influence, has to be more selective, because when you have that large of a platform, there are going to be snakes. There's going to be bad fruit on the tree that you have to be very careful not to keep a hold of. So those are a couple of different ways to view that principle. But I think that Brian has a really cool perspective. And I agree with him. Ultimately, the impact is what you have to strive for. If impact is not the end goal, influence means nothing. And please don't strive for it, because if you're going for influence for your own selfish desire, you're going to do more harm than good.
Right. So we've got a couple of guys other than Brian that have agreed to come on. We just got to get them scheduled. This was our first remote, just to kind of make sure that we're up and going, and before I waste these guys' time. But the book, the book for everybody, I've been putting it up on the ticker, is available on Amazon. If it by some chance would be out of print there or not available there now, get a hold. You can send us a message here on YouTube or wherever it is that you. You can reach out to Forerunner Productions on locals.com.
Yeah, and keep up with us. Keep up with us on our social medias and stuff too. We go to film festivals all the time. We travel all around to a bunch of different cities and stuff like that. If you find us, there's odds are we have a copy available. If you buy a copy and you want to get it signed, you can always bring it to me. It's great. I would love to do that for you guys. I don't charge for any of the signed copies that I give out, because it's just one more way that I can give to you guys. It's another way that I can add encouragement to the message that is already present. So keep up with us on all of our social medias. Mine is Chad W. Garrett or Chad Garrett Official. Sorry, I removed the W. It's Chad Garrett Official on Instagram and on Facebook are my official pages. And then, like we're talking, all the Forerunner Productions stuff. Something cool that's happening, if you don't mind, Paul, is that with Let's Talk Fortitude and sort of the rebranding, and you can stay on here, you don't have to switch it off, but with the Let's Talk Fortitude brand and everything, which you can see there, finally found it. Looking at myself backwards in the camera. But with that brand and everything like that, Let's Talk Fortitude, as Forerunner Productions itself transitions more into the narrative-driven content, we're going to continue to assist Let's Talk Fortitude. However, Forerunner Productions focuses on 3 major types of films. That's period pieces, fantasy, and sci-fi. And so podcasting is kind of an interesting thing that as a production company we're moving away from, but that doesn't mean that myself or that John is not going to be involved. What that actually looks like, special opportunity, and that is through what we are calling Bamidbar Media Ministries. Now, for anybody that studies Torah a little bit, Bamidbar is actually the Hebrew name for the book of Numbers, and it means in the desert. And so it's fitting that from the 19 years that my father came out of the desert on, that John G came out of the desert on, that I, in my own way, followed him through. And, as a leader of a household, you lead the people that are beneath you. So whether I agreed to it or not, I was going through the desert with him. And it was in the desert that God provided encouragement and a sort of a forge and a fire for us to be made better than what we were before. And so Bamidbar Media Ministries is where Let's Talk Fortitude is going to end up becoming the 501c parent company to Forerunner or to Let's Talk Fortitude, as well as other discipleship and other biblical teaching platforms that we do. The reason why we're making Bamidbar Media Ministries is so that we have something that is specifically geared towards the ministry arm that we want to be a part of, and that can focus on that mission on its own. And so the first step of that is actually Let's Talk Fortitude, and making sure that not only are we providing fortitude in business and in writing and with things like you're not special, you're gifted, but also with instructional videos and teaching videos and conversations and the people and the guests that we bring on board to Let's Talk Fortitude and such like that. So that's a cool thing that's happening. I look forward to eventually being able to share with John G and the rebrand and stuff like that we're doing with that. And then he will disseminate all of the other information to you guys, because he's actually better at the PR thing than I am. But that's a cool thing that we are doing in the future. So Forerunner Productions is where if you want to go to get your narrative content, forerunnerproductions.com, forerunnerproductions.locals.com if you want to get exclusive access, sneak peeks, as well as access to all of our short films and feature films that we're making in the future. It's where you can support us and help us make these great content, because we are, as saturated as the industry might be from a film perspective and from a storytelling perspective, with people, it's actually severely lacking in the form of solid content that people want to watch, great stories that people want to see, that actually show the true, the good, and the beautiful. And we want to share those stories with you guys. We want to make those stories, and we want to allow you guys to escape into those worlds. So come escape with us, Forerunner Productions. All right, that's my pitch.
So you can see all the up on the banner below. You go to forerunnerproductions.locals.com if you want to help support the program or become a member. Once Chad has his 501c up and rolling, then it'll be a little bit easier for you if you're looking for a tax deduction or a tax break. But also forerunnerproductions.com, there's a website there. And then you can find us at Forerunner Productions on all your podcast platforms. Say that 3 times real fast. I got to stop drinking all this coffee when I get on here. I haven't had this issue when we were in Louisiana. It was, by the way, we're going to be coming back. We're going to be having another episode. We're going to come on. We're going to talk about our trip through Texas and Louisiana, 3,000 miles, 7 days. What was it? 7, 8 recordings. And we thought we were going to have another one that we just could not get scheduled. But I got Louisiana, West Monroe, Louisiana is a very special place to me. And eventually that story will come out. I don't know when, I don't know how. I don't know if it'll be on my own platform, if it'll be on somebody else's platform that wants to have us on to talk about what happened and how I've become connected with all those guys down there who are true brothers in Christ. I know, Chad, your book, it's not a huge read. It's an easy read. It's not 5th grade level by any, I mean, it's great. It's not a huge, I mean, it's a great read. It is he says a lot in very few pages. And I think that's the great thing about it. A lot of people, not a lot of people read. And don't you have that on audiobook too?
Yeah, so we have been. You want to talk about a little bit of spiritual warfare here? We recorded the audiobook months and months and months ago, and we've been trying to upload it like 3 or 4 different times. And for some reason, the platform that we want to upload it on is saying that the front matter, like the legal matter that we have at the beginning of the book, at the beginning of the recording, is not sufficient for uploading it. So we're trying to still work through that. The audiobook version will be coming out very soon. It's just a matter of figuring out exactly what this platform needs, or finding a different platform that works better for what it is that we want to do. The reason why we chose the platform that we chose is because the versatility and the ease of being able to upload to multiple locations. So not just Audible, but also to just a bunch of other places that have audiobook capabilities, so that we can reach as broad an audience as possible. But because of other things that have been going on, it's kind of been on the back burner. So we are hoping to get that up soon. As far as when, we will have that discussion on a different podcast, because we've tried. So it has been made. It exists. It's just a matter of how it is that we're going to finally put it out there. We have talked many times about potentially releasing it on the Locals platform, if we struggle to get it out anywhere else. But nothing is confirmed yet. So it exists. It's just not released yet. So we can if once again, on our socials, if you go over to locals.com, or if you pay attention to our website at forerunnerproductions.com, when there is more information regarding the audiobook, it'll be out there.
Right. Hey, listen, we do, we had some hats, some shirts and stuff made up, and I'm kind of glad we didn't go, live with our merch at this time.
Yeah.
But however, there are guys out there that have shelter hole hats and shirts that maybe someday, if we ever make it famous, may be worth something, because we used to have 2 platforms. Someday we'll talk about all that and why we rebranded and stopped it. But I asked JJ whenever I was there last, I said, because he was actually on the shelter hole. If you go to if you go to Forerunner Productions on YouTube and you look, you're going to see the shelter hole, and you're going to see Let's Talk Fortitude. And I asked him, I said, if I had to change and go to one podcast, which one would you rather, what sounds better to you? What would you, and his wife, Elizabeth, was there as well. And he said, John, I'm just going to tell you, so man, I was going to have to ask you what the shelter hole actually meant. And I'm like, well, if I have to explain to people what it means, it's probably not very effective. So we're moving everything over to Let's Talk Fortitude. But listen, please don't write off the ones that are on the shelter hole, because they are some great episodes there. Before we get off of here real quick, which weren't on any time constraint, it's just me and you. I'd also like to talk about your short film. I mean, don't go into it a whole lot. You may not want to talk about it yet. I know that you'd put a thing out about if anybody, and because we're going to post this up right away, right? We're not going to wait. We're going to go ahead and put this up on and release this. So tell everybody a little bit about it. You're looking for people to help you kind of do a pre-screen.
Yeah. So
they're available for that. So
yeah. So I've my first short film that I have made. So I made based off of a story called "The Music of Erich Zann." It was originally written by a writer in the 1920s called H.P. Lovecraft. Now, most people are going to think of like, this guy's a Christian and he's making movies about H.P. Lovecraft. Well, yes, because H.P. Lovecraft was actually largely inspired for many of the cosmic existential horror, like monsters and stuff that he sort of conjured up in his writings, were based off of descriptions of fallen angels in the Bible. And so I took that as an opportunity and a story that I thought was was very inspiring to me, because it leaves a lot of questions to be asked. And we were going to make an audio drama version of it at one point. And so I felt God prompting me to make a short film, because I was unproven as a director, period, bar none. And I had this idea for, along with a buddy of mine, Matt Benson, I had this idea for a feature film that is actually in development right now, called Blue Side of the Mountain. And I knew that it would be almost impossible to get any financer or anybody really on board if I hadn't, stewarded the thing that I had been given. And I had been given several things. I've been given influence and a lot of really great connections in the film industry. And I had been given an idea. And so Matt Benson has the most awarded student short film in Liberty University history. He's a Liberty grad, and he and I want to co-direct this film. And I had nothing to show my directorial prowess nor my writing prowess at that particular time, besides having been the script doctor for an award-winning script at a Christian film festival. So, which is good, but not great. And so I sat down, I tried to put this thing together, and we went from nothing, zero, zilch, nada, not even a script yet, just the short story in my hands, to a fully shot. And now we are in post-production. We went from nothing to fully shot through the production side of things in 5 weeks. Praise be to God. And the people that came on to help me were incredible. We had a crew of over 30 people, most of which are students. So if you want to help support students in their careers and such, make sure that you keep an eye on this film, because it's going to be really cool. And I took something that was inspired by the Bible and then written kind of in a secular form, and I shot it. I rewrote it and I shot it in a way that I think is true to the source material, or as true to the source material as I could possibly make it on the budget that we had, while also being inspiring um, and leaves you with questions. We purposefully honor the source material by not answering all the questions that you might have in the film, because we want to inspire discussion around the film. So we are looking for some test screeners. We have filled 2 of the 10 slots available, and what that looks like is just watch the shortcut of the film, or the rough cut of the film as it presently exists, and then fill out a short questionnaire. If you are interested in being a part of this, we are taking first come, first serve on locals.com. And then after about a week, which we started this yesterday, so starting on Friday, this coming Friday, if you are not on locals.com and you would want to be a part of this, if we have any slots left, you can get to us on our Facebook page or on our social media platforms. So just leave us a comment there if you want to be a part of it. It's a really cool opportunity to be a part of a test audience. And I'm really hoping to talk more about the film and stuff like that in the next podcast, because I know that we're kind of limited at an hour. So we can come back and I can give you more details, and we can talk more about the production side, and I can tell you all kinds of fun stories about it, about the spiritual warfare that we faced while we were filming the project and everything like that. So
just for everybody's information, we are recording today, Saturday, June 24th. So if you're watching this a little bit later, everything's probably going to be filled. But yeah, please, if you do, I've seen the rough cut, man. I think it's great. I mean, we were blown away. I mean, we even seen some of the other stuff the little short film that they did of the crew while everything's being filmed, and very professionally done. I mean, once the music's put to it and all the audio and everything is cleaned up, it's amazing. And I was actually able to, Chad took me with him in Lynchburg for Eleanor's Bench, and we went on site to a house where they were using to film Eleanor's Bench. And I was blown away. You know, if you're watching the movie, you're like, man, I bet you they got that in one take, or how many takes does it take to do that? I was blown away. They will record one person's lines while both people are talking, but only one person's getting recorded. They'll do that 15 or 20 times. Then they'll turn around and do it the same thing again, another 15 or 20 times for one scene of the other person. And they're having to sit here and do this back and forth so many times. I was like, are you kidding me? So I can only, and your short movie was how many pages?
We had 11 pages, and the film itself ended up being is presently sitting, just over 16 minutes.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, and you, it was what, 40, what was the time frame of the duration you were shooting for? And then when you first went into your first cut, where were you, about how many, what kind of time frame were you looking at?
So we shot all 11 pages in 4 days. And if I had kept every scene that we shot and every clip of every scene that we shot at the full length that we shot it, we would probably be sitting at a 30 or 35 minute film. So I have cut no less than 7 scenes completely from the film itself already, and scenes that are presently in the film. Some of them were significantly longer by minutes longer than what they are now. And we've cut them down significantly to make time. So it's, and we shot all of that over the course of 4 days.
And I'm telling you, man, I was like, anyway, it's going to be to sit and watch it with Chad and him point things out that my mind or my eyes don't go to, that others, their eyes are directly drawn to it. We're not going to go into all that because I don't want, because I want you people to see, I want everybody to see the final, however, he does need your help. If you want to, do a test screening for him, I think, you won't be You won't be disappointed. You'll be very glad you did. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is the you know just real quick. You don't have to don't go into detail. Take another 5 minutes or so, and just kind of tell everybody what it was like to do your first table read.
So the first, that was
And
as
what
an
a table
actor.
read actually is.
So as an actor, as a director.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't worry about the director, because now we're going into your acting role, your first lead acting role that you've landed, and what it was like to go to your first read.
Yeah, so the first read was held in person in Houston, and I had to Zoom in to that. So I was me, and I actually play the main character in the film. So the name of the film is No Secret. It's called Parallel the Triad. It has its own Facebook page. So go to Parallel Film, parallelfilms.com. You can search that on Facebook, or not .com, but Parallel Films on Facebook. Has its own page and everything like that. It's a part of a series that's going to be coming out that's led up by a company called Parallel Films LLC. But Parallel the Triad is the introduction to this world, and my character Cyrus has a counterpart, like another part of him. It's a Christian inspired sci-fi flick, and we were the only two that zoomed in. Everyone else was in the room, and that was really cool. And so was the writer and director, and the DP was there, and they had their own BTS crew, and that was really cool. So I was sad that I didn't get to be there in person, but the experience of having a lead role and being the one that the story is about comes with a lot of pressure, actually, which is interesting. And so there's this little bit of nervousness and this little bit of giddiness that you get going into something like that for the first time. It's excitement, right? Nervousness and excitement give the same physiological response. Simon Sinek talks about that, but it's very interesting to see how that goes, because you set the tone. You may not be the one that has the lines first. You may not be the one that that speaks for the first 5-10 minutes of the table read. But as the lead of a film, whether you want to or not, you set the tone not just for the other actors, but in many ways you set the tone for the director, you set the tone for the DP, you set the tone for any other crew members, or from not just a perspective of how is this day going to go, but how is this shoot going to go? How invested in this project do I want to be? How much do I want to promote this thing? All of those questions comes down to the level of excitement that is incredibly influenced by a lead and how they approach their lines in a table read. So I approached my table read, and some people approach it in a much more chill fashion. They having been a part of a couple of them, where they read through it, but it's mostly them because they're trying to figure out the character. And I didn't do that. I studied my character before I got into it, and luckily the director has been working with me on fixing and doing some stuff. He's been leveraging my storycraft type of stuff, and he's been very humble and open to ideas, and that's been such a blessing. You don't always get that, but he's been so open to it that I've been able to study the character going in, and then at the table read, I treated it as though I was acting, even though I wasn't. I was doing the mannerisms, I was giving the inflection, I was doing all of the things that I've been taught to do as an actor, as far as holding tension and releasing tension, where I breathe, where I don't breathe, etc., so that I could bring my A game. I treated the table read as if I were going to shoot this today, what kind of energy do I need to bring to the table? And that's what I approached it with. And I think that translated well. I got a lot of compliments from the DP and from the director that they're very confident that they picked the right guy. So God bless. Thank you so much for those. It gives me a lot of confidence in doing that, and to know that I made the correct decision and going down that road. But that also doesn't mean that I got everything right. That's one of the great things about table reads, and I cannot stress enough how important table reads and rehearsals are for any future filmmaker that might be out there. Table reads and rehearsals. Not only will rehearsals save you time on the day, which means any day that you're shooting, any scene that you're shooting, if you rehearse beforehand, before you get on set that day, or if you are, and when you do your table reads, it helps actors learn their lines. It helps actors find chemistry within the relationships of the other actors that they're with. And it allows you to make suggestions. So there are a couple things in the film, like one time where my character has to go to pray. I won't say any more than that. It says that I kneel down in a prayer position, and I was like, hey, for the sake of biblical accuracy is also where I think that my character would do in this moment, instead of like doing the Catholic style kneeling and praying at some altar. Can I do what the Jews did, like whenever Joshua made the sun stand still and like pray prostrate? Can I like get on my face? Because that seems more natural and more biblically accurate. And they were like, yeah, that makes sense. And then there was another one. There's a line that is from the Bible, from the Old Testament, from the Tanakh, that I deliver in English in the script. And I raised my hand again. I was like, hey, that works, but what if I learned it in Hebrew? Can I say it in Hebrew? And then you guys either add like text or something to it, because I feel like that would increase the power of it. And they were like, huh, never thought about that. Yeah, let's see what that sounds like. And so those are just small changes, and it allows you from a writer and a director's perspective to feel, to get a feel for, where does the dialogue feel natural? Where does the dialogue not feel natural? Where does the actor feel natural saying something? Where do they feel awkward saying something? Should you change it? Should you not change it? All of these things kind of coalesce. And so being a part of that, and being as I mentioned at the very beginning, the tone setter for many of the other actors, from a personability perspective, but also from another thing, you're not just the lead in a film. You're the lead in a large, like in the film, from an artistic perspective and from what you're watching. Being a lead actor is a form of leadership. A lot of people look to you to take the reins and take control, and to lead the cast and some of the crew. Not to step on any toes from a producing perspective, not to step on any toes from a directorial perspective. That's not that kind of leadership. It's more of the interpersonal leadership, and the energy that you bring and the example that you set is so important. And
so let me stop you there. So what I want to do, there was a man I interviewed, JJ. He said, hey, we got to go back. We got to go back and start at the beginning.
mm-hmm.
And so not only, one of the perspectives that you bring to a table read or to an acting position is all the different positions that you've held. That's like Martin with Duck Commander. He was on Duck Dynasty. I watched their podcast, is where I heard this. I'm not friends with Martin, but Martin was talking to Corey or Willie, one of those anyway, in an interview, and he said, there's not a job that I have not done at Duck Commander. Now you think of that. There's not a job that he hasn't done. He's the general manager of Duck Commander now. I don't know if a lot of people realize that, but Martin, it's been really cool to watch him through his character on Duck Dynasty to see where he's at now. And I love that podcast. If anybody wants, it's the Duck Call Room. Size on there. It's all the only one that might be a little new to people. Now, he was on Duck Dynasty, and that's John David, but he wasn't as big. And Philip McMillan, they know him as Philip McVillain back then. But anyway, my point is, I digress. Let me get back on track, because I love to chase rabbits. So So when you go into that table read, you know more about, I mean, you have a different perspective because you've done everything. It's sort of like the job that I do at my business. I started from the very beginning. There's not very many positions I haven't held, so I see things differently as I go through them, as I perform my daily duties. So let's go way back. And I'm going to say a name, and I want to see what kind of reaction I get from you. Gaston. That's what I thought. So real quick, I don't know. We're
Well,
about an
hold
hour and
on.
10 minutes, but I
I've
wish
got,
your mom and I have talked, and I wish now that I would have. I wish now that I would have traveled every year to keep you in drama camps or whatever. Because I know now, as I look back on it, football, baseball, basketball, that all played a huge role in leadership and team working as a team. But I know now, as I look back on it, your actual heart and desire and love was in drama.
it was
And
storytelling.
so,
Yeah.
and Gaston was way back, and it was awesome. I mean, I think Graham's got that on video. So go ahead.
I'll take you back even farther than that, actually, and I'll say a name, and I'll get your reaction off of this one. So you can put yourself back up on the screen there for a second. But Pastor Joe Stewart.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we put on a play about 9/11 and the gospel.
Passion Play. It was that year. It was right after 9/11, and that was our
Yep.
first Passion
I
Play.
remember paper mache rocks and dressing up in my yellow rubber raincoat and being on stage. That was the first time that I ever acted on stage that I can remember.
Well, you also sang Lee Greenwood's song. What is it? God Bless the USA.
Yep.
You sang that year.
Yep. But all of that kind of happened in the same year. But you guys put on a passion play. And that was my first foray into acting. And I was a young tyke. I had no idea what I was doing. I was running back and forth. Like I played I was so young that I was supposed to play the kid, which I think was actually biblically a daughter that took the blind man to the well. Right. I did that. And then I was supposed to play this firefighter that was on one of the planes in 9/11 as it was going down. Right. And so that left a lasting impression on me. And then you are absolutely correct. After that, we fast forward and I go into middle school and I decide, well, I want to try out this drama acting thing. And I did, because at first I wanted to do dance. I thought the dance is where I wanted to be at. I was like, yeah, that's not that great. And then I took a drama class because I had one of the teacher asked me to, and she fell in love with me. And so did the choir teacher. And they were like, look, we want to keep you. Why are you waiting this long to come to us? You should have come to us so much sooner. Come on. And so they brought me in and I auditioned for the middle school play. It was Beauty and the Beast Junior that year because I thought that would be so cool. And I lived one of the craziest schedules that any young 13, 14-year-old has any right to. Because I was in the 8th grade. I was in an advanced theater class working on advanced theater production stuff, while at the same time I was portraying Gaston in a extracurricular musical show that our drama department was putting on. So I auditioned and I got cast as Gaston. And that was a blast. I mean, they had, like, I was in shape, but I was not buff. They didn't make me put a muscle suit on, thank the Lord, but they did have to use like makeup paint to make it look like I had chest hair because I didn't have any chest hair back then. So they took like this wire sponge and they dipped it in this brown paint and they dabbed it on my chest to make it look like I had chest hair underneath this red thing. And my hair was long and they pulled it back. And then I had these 3 girls that were always chasing me around behind me all the time, that they were supposed to be the ditzy girls that always followed me around. That was a formative time, man. That was so strange. I have so many weird stories of just hilarious things that happened, relationships and friendships that I built during that, and also heartbreak, because that was the first time I fell in love with a girl that was a year younger than me at that time. That was the first time I really fallen for a girl. I got my heart broken. I was crying crocodile tears the week of production, and I had to go back and see her and be on stage with this girl every day for like a week straight. That was just both a blessing and a nightmare of a time. All at the same time, man. And then you add in the idea of puberty and hormones and everything's going on. Like it was.
Oh, that's a totally different podcast, brother. Don't even go there.
Man, just not even. That's not even what but it laid a foundation because I talk about a crazy schedule because I would go to school every day. And in middle school, we started early. We started at 6:15. As I remember, we were getting dropped off at 6:15, and I think the first bell was at 7 a.m. We would go to school all day, and we get out around 2. And then at 2 o'clock, I would go straight from my homeroom class where we started and finished every day to rehearsal. And then I had special permission from the middle school football team because you were coaching at that time. Me and a couple of other guys like Camden Johnson was another one that had gotten special permission to be late to football practice, so that we could be in the play. And so we would go to the play, and then as soon as the play would let out, we would immediately go to the locker room, get dressed, and we would join practice. And we had practice for an hour and a half. Now, I was playing on 2 different football teams.
I was going to say that's the year that you played on two separate teams.
I played on 2 teams that year. It was the second year in a row that I had played on 2 football teams, and so I would go straight from one football practice into the second football practice. So I had school all day, and then I would go into rehearsal, and then I would go into practice, and then I would go into another practice. And by the time I got home, and somehow I managed that 8th grade year, I had mostly A's, a B, and a C on my report card. I have no idea how I managed that because I know that I was not studying nearly as much as I needed to maintain anything regarding that kind of a grade point average. But it was also the first year that I'd gotten anything remotely like a C. My 7th grade year, I got my first B that I'd ever gotten in school, and grades were very important to me back then. That's a completely different conversation for a different day now, as to my opinions on the public school system, grades and all of that stuff. But that was my schedule. And then we started that, I think, in December, and the first or in November, December, and then that went all the way through. I had to have been earlier, and that was we probably started that in October, and then that went all the way through December because our football season went all the way through December because I was on travel ball, and then when the football season let up, we started the production. We actually went to production with Beauty and the Beast Jr. The last weekend of January, the first weekend of February. We put the play on for 2 weeks. 3 nights. We put it on Friday, Saturday, Sunday for 2 weeks. And it was a blast. It was a great time, and it was formative because every year in high school, I went I did something in the performing arts, whether it was show choir or whether it was a theater class of some type. And I prioritized football. And I went to school with a buddy. I had a buddy named Brandon Cook, and Brandon has been on several HBO shows at this point. He's doing really well. He's studying and performing on live stages in London now. But he was kind of the goal. Yeah, man. Cookie
Are you serious?
Yeah, he's been in HBO shows, and he's performing on vaudeville, man. He's doing
all
great.
right. You guys got to understand something. This kid was one of the most talented football players that everybody talked about. Josh, but I thought Brandon was just as good, as not better than. I mean, they listened. I'm not going to say one was better than the other because we'll never know because Brandon really didn't get his shot.
Yeah, and
Brandon followed his heart and did what he did, and I'm glad that he did.
And so what Brandon
is saying, thank you very much right now.
Yeah, Brandon. So Brandon Cook, we used to call him Cookie, decided his sophomore year that football, that he had loved playing football. He loved being a part of the football team, but his career, not just his desires, but his career was going to take him down the path of acting and in film. And so his sophomore year, after the season was over, he walked away and he made this kind of a public speech thing in front of the team. He's like, look, I love all of you guys. I wanted to tell you that. I want to wish you all the best, but I'm stepping away from the team, and I hope that you guys understand. And that was one of a really, really hard conversation to have with an entire team of guys that you come to love, that you bleed with, you sweat with, you go through the suck with. So Cookie walked away, and in hindsight being what it was, the best year of football that I played, or the two best years of football that I ever played, were my 8th grade year and my sophomore year of high school. And if I could, I don't have any regrets, right? God led me down the path that He's led me down for a reason. I needed the military experience. I needed the ballroom dancing experience that I had, which is a whole nother conversation. I needed to be in Hampton Roads so I could meet my now wife. I needed that path. I think that it's very intentional, and I don't want to say one or the other, but everyone wonders, if I could have made a different choice, what would it have been? And I think that if I could make a different choice, I would have followed Brandon Cook's footsteps. And I think that after my sophomore year, I would have recognized, man, that was the best that it's going to be, because that was also the same year that our head coach that I really bonded with. I had a decent relationship with the head coach that replaced him, but the head coach that I really had a great relationship with left to go to a different school, and some of the politics around the football team sort of changed. And I think it would have been better ultimately for my academics. I think it would have been better for many different things, but it's hard to say better, because look at where I'm at now. I've written a book and I've made a short film, and I'm still in the film industry, man. And I get to be a lead in another film. So whether I took the long road here or whether this is the exact path that God wanted me to take, I'll never know. But that's one thing that I look back and I say, I wonder.
Kenny Moore, Highway 55 Burger, Shakes, and Fries, on his podcast that we shot with him, looked right at me. We were talking about our experiences, growing up and things we experienced through life. And he said, hey, those are the things that make us who we are today.
Yeah.
So,
right.
That's the way we have to look at that.
And
hey, you and I are going to get together and talk about the 3,000-mile, 7-day podcast trip. I'm going to go ahead and shut this thing down if you're good with that.
Yeah, man. Let's do it again.
A little bit more to go. And look, once again, I'm going to put it back up here on the old ticker thing. Again, you go to forerunnerproductions.locals.com, forerunnerproductions.com, Forerunner Productions on all your podcast platforms. Are we on Spotify, or do you have to pay to be on there?
No, we're on Spotify.
We're on Spotify. Okay. I didn't know if we were or not, but anyway, I use Podbean. I know that a lot of the guys that we've shot with, they listen on Apple Play.
Yep.
And we're on YouTube. So Twitter, every now and then you can see us. I don't know if Chad's up on Twitter or not, but we haven't. I'm not brave enough to go live yet. So I'm still kind of. I'm a type, man, you better be careful putting me live, because I'll end up getting shut down, or somebody will, I'll get defunded, which we're not funded yet anyway. Listen, before we get out of here, I've got one guy I want to give a shout out to, and I'll be mentioning more about him to come. But his name is Chris Randall. Go to YouTube and look him up. He has a podcast that's called My Crazy God Story. This guy is awesome. They're 2 to 3 minute or 1 to 3 minute little things where he tells a quick God story, and he's very well spoken, very literate, and he has also agreed to come on. We're working through the schedule and the date and the time, and I wanted to give this a test run. So, Chris, if you're watching this, man, we look forward to having you on. And can't wait to bring your story. I've been on your watching some of your podcasts and listened to some of your story. And man, I am excited to have you on and to talk about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Chad, thank you. And I'm going to see you on the other side. And I just hope that all this works out all right, man, because I'm liking it so far, being able to put everything up the way that we are. So anyway, guys, we'll see you. This is Let's Talk Fortitude, and we'll see you in the next one.